All right, so let's be honest. When students hear Florida license law, most people immediately think this is going to be boring. But here's the reality: this section is one of the most important parts of the Florida real estate exam. And honestly, it is also one of the easiest sections to score points on if you understand the wording. All right, so today we're going to break down what FERC actually is, the power FERC has, license statute, escrow rules, common violation, and the biggest exam traps students fall into. And trust me, Florida loves testing this material. One of the reasons students struggle with this section is because Florida law questions can sound very similar. Sometimes one small word changes the entire answer. That's why reading carefully is critical. The Florida exam focuses heavily on Florida specific rules. This means you cannot rely only on general real estate knowledge. You need to understand how Florida does things specifically. So let's start with the big question. What exactly is FERC? FERC stands for Florida Real Estate Commission. Their main job is regulating real estate licenses and protecting the public. Think of FERC as a referee of Florida real estate. They create rules, monitor licenses, and step in when violation happens. So if real estate had a rule book, FERC helps make sure everyone follows it. FERC has several major responsibilities that students need to know for the exam. This is one of those areas where the exam may ask direct questions, so pay close attention. FERC enforces license law, discipline licensees, create the rules, and approve education courses. So yes, FERC has a lot of authority in Florida real estate. Now let's talk about the powers that FERC has. And trust me, the exam loves asking about this. When you see a question about what FERC can or cannot do, slow down and read it carefully. FERC can deny licenses, suspend licenses, revoke licenses, issue fines, and place licensees on probation. So if a licensee violates the law, FERC can absolutely take action. Now let's move into license types. Florida has three major license classifications students should know. This section is usually straightforward, but students still mix up the terms. The main license types are sales associate, broker, and broker associate. A sales associate works under a broker. A broker can operate independently, and a broker associate has a broker license but chooses to work under another broker. Now, this is a very important exam topic license statuses. The exam loves asking questions whether someone can legally perform a real estate service based on the status of their license. You should know the difference between active, voluntary, inactive, and expired. These terms may sound simple, but the exam loves comparing them. Here's the easiest way to remember. Active license means you can legally perform real estate services. Inactive license means you cannot legally practice real estate. So even if someone technically has a license, if it is inactive, they cannot legally practice real estate. This is a major exam point. License status matters. Now let's talk about involuntary inactive status. This usually happens because of mistakes or missed requirements. In other words, the licensee did not choose it on purpose. Common causes include failure to renew, missing continuing education, or DBPR related issues. Basically, the licensee failed to complete something required. That can place their license in involuntary inactive status. Voluntary inactive status is different. This is when the licensee chooses inactive status. Maybe they are taking a break, changing career temporarily, or not ready to practice. A licensee with voluntary inactive status still cannot practice real estate, but the reinstatement process is usually easier because the inactivity was intentional. This is the big difference. Now let's move into one of the most important topics in Florida real estate, escrow. When students hear escrow, some immediately get nervous. But once you understand the basics, escrow rules become much easier. Florida takes escrow very seriously, and honestly, students see escrow questions consistently on the exam. So this is a topic you definitely do not want to skip. Brokers have major responsibilities when handling escrow funds. This is not money the broker can casually touch or mix with other funds. Escrow must be handled properly. Broker duties include escrow deposit, timelines, proper accounting handling, and maintaining accurate records. Small mistakes with escrow can become big problems. This is why Florida tests this area so often. Now, here are two words students must know: commingling and conversion. These two terms sound similar to some students, but they are very different, and both are serious violations. Commingling means mixing escrow funds with personal or business funds. Conversion means stealing or using escrow funds improperly. And trust me, Florida does not play around with either one. Now let's talk about common violations students should know. These are the type of actions that can get licensees in trouble. And yes, they can show up on the exam. Common violations include fraud, misrepresentation, false advertising, operating with an active license, and mishandling escrow. All of these can lead to disciplinary actions. This is why licensees must follow the rules carefully. So, what happens if a licensee violates the law? This brings us to disciplinary actions. This is another area that the exam likes to test. Possible penalties include fines, suspension, revocation, and probation. So the consequences can be very serious. This is why understanding Florida license law matters in both the exam and real life. Now let's talk about the recovery fund. This is another Florida specific topic students should know. The recovery fund is designed to help protect consumers in certain situations. The recovery fund helps protect consumers by paying damages in certain situations. But here's the important part: the licensee usually has to repay the fund. So it is not just free money with no consequences. Florida also requires continuing education for license renewal. This is important because a licensee must keep up with their education requirement to maintain their license properly. This includes post-license education, continuing education hours, and renewal deadlines. And yes, Florida absolutely expects licensees to stay educated. Missing these requirements can affect the license status. Now let's talk about the trap students fall into most often. These are the little things that cause students to miss questions even when they study the topic. The biggest traps usually involve similar wording, escrow confusion, active versus inactive licensees, and questions about FERC authority. The key is slowing down and reading carefully. Do not let tricky word throw you off. So, what's the best way to study this section? Simple. Focus on the rules that the Florida tests the most. You want to understand the terms and practice applying them. Focus heavily on terminology, scenario questions, and Florida specific rules. The more practice questions you do, the easier this section becomes. Remember, the exam is test and application, not just memorization. Now, let's wrap this up with some exam day strategy. By the time you get to exam day, your goal is to stay calm and trust your preparation. Read carefully, watch the wording, eliminate obviously wrong answer, and stay calm. Sometimes the exam is testing your reading skills more than your memory. So slow down and think through each question. I want everyone to remember this. You absolutely can master Florida license law. This section is very passable once you understand the terminology and practice the concepts consistently. Practice daily, focus on understanding, not memorization only, and trust your preparations. The students who do well are actually usually the students who practice consistently and read questions carefully. And I want to thank everyone for watching this. I hope this presentation helps simplify Florida license law and FERC rules. And remember, consistency creates confidence.